to the point Brian made earlier, I think really the whole effort here for us is to talk about how process automation is kind of leading to an automation cloud. And I thought I'd have this kind of discussion really in three contexts, right? The first is really around how, we're seeing this happen in terms of use cases. We're also beginning to see this happen much more broadly in the context of how those use cases are then transferring into kind of architectures that make those use cases possible. And then finally, how roadmaps actually make all of that possible. And we'll walk through specifically our roadmap to kind of give you greater context there. In setting this up, I thought really, as we talk about the use cases themselves, there's really kind of three categories or three spaces where clients have spent time. The first is around how to save in IT organizations or in businesses, like how do we continue to drive EBITDA? And especially as the market continues in the next 2-3 years, that's going to continue to be a huge focus for many businesses. The second is really around growth. How do we continue to grow? How do we enable growth in a scalable long-term way? And then obviously, how do we continue to be able to transform the businesses we work in? As we were thinking and doing some research around this, specifically in the context of the conference, Gartner's kind of top trends in the space really became obvious. There's a lot of work that's been done specifically around kind of how these three categories, the ability to optimize, the ability to scale, and the ability to pioneer are affecting our architectures. And all of this needs to obviously be underpinned by a sustainable technology. And I was hoping in the next couple of slides to kind of frame up how we see that happening. The first is the whole idea of optimizing for resilience, being prepared for the unexpected and to actually kind of think through how the unexpected will affect our organization. We're finding that, more and more there's the need for cloud automation tools to be able to, and processes and platforms, specifically like ProcessMaker, to be able to enable, just even within IT organizations, the ability to observe data, the ability to augment tests, the ability to auto-remediate, to be able to create alerts around actions that need to be taken when there's a failure or when there's an issue. And we really want to be able to continue to make those more obvious, more easy to use, and just more available in general. We begin to see that actually happen in multiple contexts. I was actually thinking on the far left, the example actually is how American Airlines has really focused on trying to run full-scale experiments where they're using a tool or a set of tools to be able to create or launch processes so that would mimic the failure of a specific part of the airline's infrastructure, or mimic a significant weather event somewhere in the country. As I was putting this together, I really had kind of that thought of Southwest and how maybe they too should begin to think through resiliency planning. The second set of features is really around kind of resiliency in feature deployment. So being able to kind of not only test, but confirm that a set of functionality works. And then obviously the third is in not only in incident resolution, but in identifying incidents as soon as they happen. And the more of those processes that we can handle both proactively as well as reactively will be important. We want to obviously make it easy for the user to be able to identify that they have an issue and bring that issue to the rest of the business, or for a consumer to identify with the business that there's an issue, but also in reverse. We'd really like for the issue to be resolved with the consumer in real time. To be able to do this, we think, there's a whole set of capabilities that are needed, and we really believe that a lot of these will be embedded in kind of a cloud automation capability. There's events, there's images, there's email, there's just context that can feed a set of transactions. And this will be raw data that goes into an IDP for document processing or to understand the context of a document. It can be content where we're classifying large quantities of or large volume of email. It then kind of builds into being able to see a user journey or a specific customer experience, which we can then extend obviously to apply and make recommendations based on those, and then obviously drive automation in that context. So as we kind of move up the food chain here, we think really the whole effort for companies is going to be to make sure that tools like ProcessMaker are able to have access to that data, to be able to effectively guide users along the decision-making path. And we think that's going to happen in a couple of places. We think that's going to happen in the tools themselves as the designer goes about the process of designing a process, but we also think it's going to happen in the context of having the process itself move to being proactive, move to being able to identify when a customer should be notified of a specific transaction. In all of this discussion around AI, there's really kind of another set of needs. And that second set of needs is really around making sure that there's some level of trust, some level of risk management and security management, some ability for us to be able to see how that decision was made or what we were prioritizing in the context of making a decision. And here we think really two components will become incredibly important. The first is analytics around how the process was designed in the first place. And the second is the analytics around the data that was ingested in making that decision. So we think two things are going to happen. Into the tools, we're already working on implementing analytics to give us all a clear view of how implementations happen, of exactly what processes have been drawn out, and how the software is making those decisions on behalf, even if it's if then else, on behalf of the consumer. The second is going to be to continue to drive analytics into the data sets that are available or that are being used by ProcessMaker. So we can begin to see, what decisions are most likely or what decision paths have previously been made from, that data set. So we see that in general, the approval path for an invoice, for example, below a certain threshold happens quickly, or we're noticing that, the invoices between $5,000 and $7,000 are the ones that are actually getting processed the most slowly in the context of all the other invoices. And therefore, the software should focus on how to drive greater efficiency in just that invoice category or invoice bracket. The next real step here, we think, is going to be in building the tools to make it possible for IT and business teams to be able to use complex infrastructure. Obviously, as everyone moves to the clouds, there's multiple options, there's multiple SaaS solutions, and brands are being built of this whole collection of small clouds, small SaaS solutions, and then a big platform that IT has deployed in AWS or Azure or Google Cloud or Oracle, for example. And in doing that, there's really kind of three components which pop up. The need to have reusable components, simple, easy to use developer tools that can be pushed out to the business, and self-service development tools. The whole idea here is that for IT organizations, and as our partners work with IT organizations, both the partner and the business teams should be able to build in simple terms and with simple tools actually reasonably complex processes that solve for one-off situations, but also have the tools to learn and be able to continually improve that process. So to be able to do this, and we think fundamentally that that orange area is the cloud automation set of tools that we're focused on executing against. This last kind of core area that we find is growing here is the idea of super apps. And a super app is really simply defined as the ability to have the four components that you see on the screen, the ability to be able to activate users, both proactively and reactively, as I mentioned, being able to share data across multiple processes. So, and you'll see this as we talk about our roadmap, but the idea of a data vault, the idea that the software has this large set of data that it can use across multiple processes, being able to have mini apps, both from a development perspective, as well as, being able to publish small apps to specific user communities within our organizations. And then finally, being able to have, making sure that the core features or the core process capabilities are always available. We see this kind of playing out then, and this is kind of, defended in research, that in really kind of three things happening. We're seeing a really significant effort towards industry cloud platforms, where not only are clients buying and using clouds that are HR clouds and IT clouds and sales clouds and marketing clouds, but there's also kind of a huge push to industry-specific clouds, where the solutions are tying together capabilities from multiple other from infrastructure and from SaaS to be able to provide the solutions specific to this industry and solve for the unique requirements of a specific industry like banking or education or similar. And to be able to do this, really, we think there's three significant components. There's the need for connectors, the ability to build a data fabric, the ability to pull data in from potentially your sales cloud and your marketing cloud and your finance cloud to be able to run a process. And that process could be varied. It could be a process in digital marketing, specifically around doing a cost analysis across multiple campaigns that have multiple engagement techniques. The second is really the idea of templates and the ability to implement templates effectively so that there's a significant amount of reusability at the total process level, as well as at a smaller level, specifically around composition tools. Over time, though, we see this, and in the next year, we see this really kind of coming together where industry cloud platforms will really help accelerate value. We think developers and business technologists will be able to use tools that unify a library of packaged business capabilities, make it easy for these APIs to be able to connect together and to be able to build composable tools, with that data fabric we talked about in the context of an AI set of tools, and really to help teams across multiple parts of the organization work together effectively. Now, we think there's obviously going to be a progression here. They're obviously vertical specific, but we think customers are going to start off with obviously, simple capabilities like compute and storage and so on in the cloud to, being able to use horizontal products, back office products, and then finally build up to clinical trials, core banking, Internet of Things specific to a business. And the whole idea is companies kind of build this vertical specific cloud is to be able to knit this together in a way that allows the customer to function effectively. We want to be able to make it possible for the brand and for our clients to be able to use the features that are really specific to this part of the business and integrate them to everything you see lower in the stack, right? So the HR tools should be integrated to the vertical specific tools. The front office CRM should also be tied to the vertical specific tools that we've talked about so far. To be able to kind of bring this all together, obviously we see the execution happening in super apps, but we also see this kind of building into a core set of automation, a core set of capabilities that becomes or that is the automation cloud. We think of the cloud really in a couple formats. As I've talked about for a few minutes, the idea of vertical specific clouds will allow a super app to happen, right? Automation will make it possible for us to kind of extend the capabilities of the vertical specific cloud, to connect to other clouds, as well as to build all the features that are needed in that specific vertical. There's a couple of specific examples, going back to airlines, obviously the airline core, the GDS, will have the booking and the flight and, the PNR of that specific individual. But properly connecting loyalty, properly connecting catering, properly connecting, all the other components of a customer's flight really will create that proactive experience, before the day of travel, on the day of travel, and then obviously post-travel. So that's one example. In other verticals like education and so on, we think there's a real set of extensibility into how the other parts of the organization connect with the core or the ERP that runs the education platform. And the same is true in banking or in credit cards or any one of the other verticals our partners are super engaged in. The second part of that, once that set of super capabilities is available, is the ability to build micro apps, internal apps, and then partner apps. And across the bottom, specifically for banking, I thought of a couple examples. The large set of capabilities around account opening and account management would be one set of super apps. Within that, there may be the need for signatory management, specifically around managing new signatories for nonprofits that change every year. And then being able to market or remarket to prospects who engaged with the brand but didn't actually go through the process of completing an account opening. Obviously, this then extends to banker tools to make specific processes for bankers more effective and can be connected to partner organizations for hiring tools, for example. And that way, we believe that the first set of capabilities, which was to build the super app, slowly scales out and makes it possible for a brand to knit together all the specific process capabilities it needs across the organization, eliminating a ton of the physical handoffs that currently happen in Slack, in email, or in very large file formats. To be able to build this effectively, we think there's really kind of three big components. The first is an intent engine, the second is a decision engine, and the third is a source engine. The intent engine is really focused on being able to understand what the customers, the user is attempting to accomplish. The second is a decision engine, really being able to determine how best to serve that client. It could be BPM, it could be an actual decision engine, it could be AI. And then of course, we need sources for the content to be able to answer or resolve that intent expressed by the user in the first place. To be able to kind of knit that together, we believe that these are the major components required of an automation cloud. On the far left, obviously, intent can be expressed in multiple ways. Intent can be expressed in a whole series of documents. It can be expressed in a single document, that's been physically filled out or, has been digitally filled out as a PDF. It can be expressed in chat on Google or in Apple Business Chat. It can be expressed in web forms, which is something we do, at scale today. It can also be expressed in SMS or in chat. And then, of course, everyone's favorite, Chat GPT. So all of those are options in terms of should be options in terms of being able to understand what the customer or the client is attempting to accomplish. The second set of capabilities is really the ability to make the decision, as I said before. And that could be in a BPM, that could be a decision engine, that could be AI that specifically supports the BPM or supports the decision engine. And the idea here is to be able to scale further, to be able to do things like cost-based routing, to be able to do SLA-based routing of actual events so that we can route the right event to the right person, at the lowest cost or, at the best fit for SLA within the bounds of the client. Obviously, the ability to escalate to a human remains incredibly important. And then the data and analytics that follow are also important to make sure that clients are able to see and use the components that they understand. Of course, the source engines in terms of like where this data comes from can be, pretty varied. And we think there's the need for each of these to effectively kind of scale an organization. There's authored data. Search would be the ability to reuse or use your Elasticsearch capabilities within an enterprise. APIs are really self-evident, and then documents and RPAs will allow us to kind of go get data from otherwise unavailable sources. There's been much discussion around ChatGPT, and we thought the best way for ProcessMaker to kind of engage with this next round of technologies is to engage with specific functional capabilities over time. So our goal, for example, is going to be able to take documents that are being processed through our IDP solution and be able to summarize them, be able to make it possible for a chat interface to query content that's within or available through ProcessMaker or the APIs that ProcessMaker is connected to. We want to be able to identify keywords or create spreadsheets based on content that's already provided. And then we want to be able to parse unstructured data. I'll send these slides, or I think these slides will be available afterwards. So happy to talk through each of these individually or where relevant at a later time. So this leads kind of to the roadmap. And I obviously am not going to walk through the whole roadmap, but kind of the key components here. And as we look at that, there's a couple of things worth identifying. The first is really that, we want to be able to build out that analytics capability, not just so that clients can better see how long and where processes are and where they end and how long they take and where they get stuck and where the bottlenecks are, but also to be able to kind of extend that, to be able to create large data sets that will give us a view of what and how we should be automating as we kind of go forward. The same is true of cloud and product as we take those next steps. The performance of the software and the performance of the product should also kind of come through in a really clear way. We talked a little bit earlier about RPAs and decision engines, and both of those should be available in the software. We also talked about kind of extending our capabilities in terms of MuleSoft integrations and Boomi integrations, specifically around creating that data fabric. We believe there's going to be a whole set of connectors which are standard and built into the software, and then there's going to be a whole set that are available through these third-party connector integrations. After that, of course, we kind of want to be able to extend to be able to always drive a series of improvements. Autosave, import, export, dependent fields are ones that have been talked about for quite a while now. And we definitely plan to continue to execute against those and improve those capabilities. We also want to be able to do things like provide Lambda functions in Azure, in AWS, and similarly in Google and Azure. And the whole concept here is that a client should be able to kick off a series of processes that run a micro app or run a set of capabilities that return results and shut down. So brands can then, essentially allow themselves a set of cloud agnostic capabilities. They can pick the cloud that offers the cheapest compute and send the work that they have to that cloud. The work is done, the results come in. We can use the Lambda, ProcessMaker can use a Lambda function to shut down those services. This way, brands actually have the flexibility around where they send, a body of work and how that body of work gets done. Templates will continue to be a significant need in terms of being able to scale. And then, of course, data vaults will help us really make sure that we're collecting and sharing data across, as in a safe way, of course, in an encrypted way, across processes to allow a brand to, benefit from or allow a second process to benefit from the capabilities of a first process, and for a brand to feel like a single organism, a single fabric where access to data is transparent across the platform. After that, we really want to focus on doing a couple of things with the user experience. Our goal here really is to make sure that the modeler, the screen builder are not only easy to use, but extend to being collaborative. We want two people to be able to design together. We want, pair coding to be possible. We want it to be really easy for the tools to come together, both in terms of UX as well as in terms of being able to comment on each other's work and be able to pick up work where the other person left off. And finally, of course, we want to be able to extend how the cloud works to be able to really support both a Kubernetes capability and a microservices architecture, so that clients, you have much more flexibility in terms of how the software scales, how the software fits in the unique environments that your companies are built on. And of course, there's such a wide variety of those. It's really important to kind of make it as simple as possible and to democratize that whole process. So thank you very much for the time. I hope this wasn't too rushed, and of course would love to catch up with each of you individually if and when you have the time.